As parents, we love to find simple things that we can do that have a positive effect on our kids. And that's what this channel is all about. This is a little bit more complicated. But I had to do this video because it's about something that happened in our family and had very positive effects, short-term and long-term. I'm going to detail some of those long-term effects at the end of this video. And if you stick around, they may surprise you. Pretty cool stuff. So, if you have a teenager or children that are going to grow up to be teenagers, you may get this question someday. Your child comes to you and says, "Mom, can we paint my bedroom?" Your first response might be, "Well, I did have other things I was going to do with my weekend." But it's a reasonable request. So we think, I wonder if she or he is old enough to paint their own bedroom. Why would we want our child to paint their own bedroom? Because there are other things that we might want to do with our weekend. So the question really becomes, can a teenager or a pre-teenager with proper direction actually do a good job painting their bedroom? What's the answer to that question? Well, the answer is yes, they absolutely can. But here's a little bit of a newsflash. Teenagers are not professional painters. And if you've ever seen a sloppy paint job done somewhere, you realize that it looks dreadful and it's really difficult to fix once it's done. So it has to be done correctly. That's what this video is all about. A relatively simple, detailed, step-by-step process, 12 steps in total, that will help your child to actually do a good job painting their bedroom. How do I know this works? Well, my daughter came to me when she was 15 with this exact question. She had a vision for her bedroom. She wanted to have a two-tone color scheme for it. And I said, "Hey, I'll make you a deal. I'll buy you everything that you need. I'll give you directions and oversee what you're doing and check it out. But you do the work yourself." And she said, "Okay." How did it turn out? She was happy. Mom and Dad were happy. And we went out and got some pizza that night because it was such a good job. Now, before we dive right in, let me ask you this question. If you and your child, teenager or otherwise, have done a big project around the house, painting or whatever, let us know in the comments below how that job has turned out, positive and negative. I'd be interested in reading that. I'm sure other parents would as well. So, 12-step process. Step number 1, get some inspiration. Now, your child may already have an idea of what sort of color they want to paint their bedroom, but it's a good idea to get a little bit more inspiration. Check out some other sources. You can go to Instagram and put in something like teenagers' bedrooms. You can go to Pinterest, or you can go to houzz.com, HOUZZ.com, and you'll see lots of pictures that can be inspiring. And this is really useful because your child may think, they saw another bedroom that was kind of pink and they really like it, but once they see some photos of other things that are possibilities, they might say, this light turquoise color is really cool. I really want to go for that rather than the original idea that I had. So getting some inspiration is step number 1. Step number 2 is to get some paint chips. Now, you can do this contactless. Paint stores will actually send you the chips. So you want to get a collection of chips, maybe 7 to 10 different color chips. And they'll sometimes come on a strip. Sometimes they'll come individually. And you want to just have these different shades that are close to the color that you saw online. So if it was this light turquoise that I mentioned, you want to get a bunch of colors that are in that light turquoise family. Ones that are darker, ones that are lighter, ones that are a little duller, ones that are a little brighter. Then you take them into the bedroom and you actually go through a process of elimination. You just look at the chips and you'll see right off the bat, oh, that's too bright or that's too dull. Just eliminate those, but you should be able to narrow it down to 1, 2, maybe 3 different chips that you think are pretty good choices. Cut those out. If it turns out to be 3 different chips, just take and lightly tape them to the existing wall, about 3 feet apart. Just, separate them a little bit and just kind of look at them and evaluate them. Now, these little chips, which, they're only about this big, sometimes they're a little bit bigger, they're not going to really give you an accurate understanding of what the whole wall is going to look like when it's painted that color. So you have to try to use your imagination a little bit and envision what the wall is going to be like with that color. But the next step is going to help us make a better decision on this. Step number 3 is to get a color sample custom mixed up. Color sample, you get a little bit of paint. This is a color sample. It's only 15 ounces and it was mixed up, cost maybe $5, and it's the exact color that you saw on that chip. Now there's one other thing that's very useful when you get one of these things. Get a little foam brush or a little cheap brush so that you can actually fit it in the top, because these things have pretty small tops sometimes. Now the next step that you're going to do is you're simply going to take it back to your bedroom and you're going to paint a swatch on the wall. Shake up the paint if it's not already stirred and actually put it on the wall. Do like a 24-inch by 24-inch swatch of that exact color. Live with it for a little bit. Live with it for a couple days. See what it's like on a sunny day. See what it looks like at nighttime when your child's doing homework and they just have like a couple artificial lights in the room. Live with it and make sure that you really like it. If you don't like it, just do this process again. Get the next closest choice and run another sample and paint another swatch on the wall. This is one of the best ways to do it, and it does take some extra effort, but what it prevents is this effect at the end of the job when you're looking at the whole room that's been painted and all of a sudden you're saying, gosh, I didn't know that pink was really so bright. And then you realize you've kind of not made the best choice. So it's a little extra time, a little extra money, but it's a good long-term investment for the success of the job. Step number 4, now you're ready to buy paint. How much paint to buy? Well, we have a little math problem. Every gallon of paint is going to have a certain coverage to it. You have to figure out how much you have to buy. You're going to buy 1 gallon, 2 gallons, 3 gallons, depending on how big the bedroom is. Now, most paints in a gallon will usually cover around 400 square feet, but it does vary a little bit, and it does vary based on the quality of the paint that you do. So you have a little bit of a math problem to do with your child. Figure out what the area is of each wall, add them all up, and get an idea of how many square feet you have to paint. There's one thing that can be a little bit confusing about buying the paint. The paint comes in different grades at different price points. So you will likely see the gallon of paint that costs $25 a gallon. Then you'll see the one that costs $35. Then you'll see the upper end that costs $45. Wow, this is a big difference. What is the difference? Well, it's been my experience that when it comes to paint, you usually get what you pay for. And with those expensive paints, you can pretty much put down one coat and just touch it up and you'll be done. Whereas the cheaper paints will many times require 2 whole separate coats. So a lot more work in buying the cheaper paint. So I always go with the more expensive one because you're going to have to buy more of the cheaper paint to do the same job anyway. So it usually works out to be about the same. And the more expensive paints are just so much nicer to work with. They just have a velvety feel to them. So try it. I think you'll like that. Now here's a little tip. Most people will paint a bedroom in a flat paint color. They don't use gloss or semi-gloss. But there's one finish that we've used over and over again very successfully, and that is eggshell. Now, if you get an eggshell finish on your paint rather than a flat coat, it will have a tiny, tiny little bit of gloss to it. It's very small, barely noticeable. But what I have found is that it's easier to clean up the walls when something happens. You bump into a wall with a piece of furniture. You scuff it, it gets some dirt on it, something like that. So eggshell is generally a little bit more durable, I have found, in those kinds of applications. Next up, step number 6, clear out the space as much as possible. Now, it's going to be ideal for your child to sleep in another area of the house for the duration of this project, which will be probably a day or two, something like that. And one of the reasons you want to do that is you do not want your child sleeping in a freshly painted room. When you paint the space, it needs to be ventilated and aired out for a period of time per the recommendations. And it's good to move as much stuff out of the bedroom as possible. Everything if you can. If you can't, what you can do is you can kind of move everything into the center of the bedroom as much as possible so that you have a perimeter to kind of go around as you're doing the painting. So that will work as well. Step number 7. Now we're going to do a little bit of wall prep. So take the pictures down off of the wall and pull out the nails with a plier or a claw hammer, and you're going to want to spackle the holes. Now I will say you don't have to necessarily do this if all the pictures are going to go back on the nails that they're already hung on. But a lot of times when you paint a bedroom, you want a whole new look, so you might want to put pictures in different locations. So when you pull these nails out, you're going to have a little hole. Now we're not just going to paint over that hole. We're going to use something called spackling compound. Very easy to do. You just take this stuff with a spackling knife, just dab a little bit on the hole, just scrape it off, let it dry, and then come back with sandpaper or a sanding block. Something like this is fantastic. 120 grit works pretty good, and you just kind of lightly sand it. Only takes a moment. Then kind of touch it with your hand, kind of look at it and inspect it. Is it smooth? Is it going to show? If it's a particularly deep hole, you might have to use 2 coats and let them dry in between. But it's an easy thing to do. Now, the other thing that you're going to find on every teenager's bedroom is going to be tape. Tape from posters, right? It's going to be difficult to get off. You don't want to paint over that. You want to use something that's like a adhesive remover, something like Goo Be Gone is one that works pretty well. You want to get all the old tape that's off there, because if you paint over it, it actually will show. And it might actually, some of that chemical from the adhesive might actually come through the paint and then discolor. It's just not a good thing. So this wall prep, it is an investment in time, but it will pay off. Now, just a little bit more wall prep and we're done with that. So step number 8, we're going to clean the walls. We're just going to quickly clean the walls. So when you pull that furniture away, you are going to find that there is dust that's been sitting there for a long period of time. You might not even see it. It's probably going to be down around the baseboard, but take a wet towel, a wet face cloth, some wet paper towels even, a slightly damp sponge, and just go over those surfaces several times, just with a little bit of water. Now, you should definitely not paint over these things. This cleaning process is really important because all of this stuff will show. Cobwebs are pretty durable, so if you actually paint over that with a brush, you'll get like a yellow cobweb that will stay there. So you really want to do a good job with this prep work. Now for step number 9, we want to protect the floor. You're going to use a tarp, and tarps come either in cloth or in plastic. I tend to like cloth myself. They fold up really easy. They're simple to move around. They last a long time. That's what most painters use. You want to put that on the floor, put any furniture that's staying in the room on top of it. Get it up fairly close to the walls. You can kind of fold it back a little bit if you need to. So that should protect your floor surfaces. Now, step number 10, only 3 steps to go, and we are at last at the painting step. We've done all the prep stuff, and we're now at the painting step. The first painting that we want to do is edging, and that means we want to take the paint and actually edge it up close to any trim around the door, trim around the windows, up around the ceiling, because the ceiling will probably stay white. And I'm going to show you something that's one of the greatest inventions in history. And that is an edging brush. And you can see that this one's had lots of love. You see this crazy angle here? This really, really works well for edging. You dip it in the paint, you turn it, and you can just angle it, and very, very quickly you can get a really good, crisp edge. It does take a little bit of practice. Some people use tape. I am a fan of the edging brush. It's a nice thing when you learn how to use that. Tape takes time to do, it costs money to do. Some people swear by it, so either one can work, but I think learning how to do edging is a really nice skill, and you can get pretty quick at it, and you can get really sharp edges with it. Once you have your edging done, and you may have to do it twice, you may have to touch it up a little bit. You'll look at that edge that you've kind of put over by the door, and you look, oh, there's kind of a little bit of a thin place there, so you might have to do just a little bit of dabbing, just a little bit of touching up. Now we're on to the rollers, and here is a typical roller. What kind of roller to get? Well, for most bedrooms, you can do a 1/4 inch nap, and that's perfect. So that's what you'll see on the package. You just slide it onto the holder, and you put it in a paint tray and dump some paint in there. Don't roll down too much paint at a time. You don't want it to be too thick because it can drip and leave lines. You don't want it to be too thin, kind of a balance, and that will give you the best result. Now here's kind of a cool tip. So say you have to paint over several sessions. Maybe you have soccer practice or something, so you're going to have to leave this project for maybe 4 hours with your kid. What you can do, rather than clean everything up, which is a lot of work, you can take a plastic bag or a couple plastic bags and put them tightly around your brush and even your roller with the paint in the tray. Put a rubber band around it or put some tape around it, just seal it up, and you can go away for 4 or 5 hours and everything will be fine, so you don't have to paint your brush. You can't do this overnight or for long periods of time, obviously. The paint will eventually dry out, but for a short period of time you can get away with not having to clean everything, which is a lot of work, frankly. So now we finally come to the last step, which is number 12, and probably the easiest step, and that is just touch up. So you've rolled the walls, you've done the edging, Just take a hard look around and see if you need some touch-up. And you probably will in the areas that you have rolled. You'll see some thin areas where the color that you had before is coming through. So you want to come and take your paint and just go lightly over that area till you cover them up. It should perfectly blend in if you do that. So in a lot of cases, especially if you use the good paint, you will not have to do the whole wall again, which is terrific. So I mentioned earlier that I would talk about the long-term benefits that this had for our kids. Now, one of the benefits it had, obviously, was that it taught our children that if you have a complex job and you break it down into tinier pieces, you can actually do a big project, and that there's a process to it, and that's a valuable thing to learn. But the other thing that was really cool is that both of our kids became quite skilled at painting. Now, when you think about it, when our kids get out of college someday, which may seem like a long way down the road, but they will, what do? They move into an apartment. A little bit later, they're going to buy a house probably, or a condominium. What do they want to do? They want to paint their rooms, or they might want to paint the whole interior. Knowing how to paint is a really, really valuable skill, because hiring somebody to paint is very, very expensive. You actually can learn to do it yourself. Another little anecdote, when my daughter finished painting her room, a couple months later, she wanted to buy some Nintendo game console or something, I think it was, and she needed a good bit of money for it. She came and said, "Hey guys, is there any room I can paint in the house? I need to earn some money." And she did. She painted one of our small extra bedrooms, and she did a terrific job on that one as well. Saved me the time of painting it later on. So I hope you decide to do a project like this with your kids. And leave a comment below and let us know how it turns out. And also, if you're a painter, let us know any comments or tips that you have that might make this job easier, something that I don't know. At any rate, I hope this was useful with your family, and I will see you in the next one.